Welcome to STEAM Powered, where I have conversations with women in STEAM to learn a little bit about what they do and who they are. I'm your host, Michelle Ong. My guest today is Dr. Carly Howett. Carly is an outer solar system scientist whose main interest lies in the surface properties of icy worlds. Join us as we talk about her journey to planetary sciences, icy worlds, and the upcoming NASA Lucy mission. Thank you so much for joining me today, Carly. It's so great to have you speaking with me on STEAM Powered today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's fun to be here.
Excellent. So you started off with business and physics, which I think is a cool combination. What made you what was your interest in physics to begin with?
I've always liked questions, solving questions, trying to understand how things work. Given a screwdriver and electronics, I'm likely to take it apart. One of those people. So, uh, I,
Excellent.
I enjoyed science at school and physics in particular. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do at uni. And the advice I was given was do something you like because you're going to be doing it for a while. So physics is really nice because there's lots of things that you can go into afterwards. It's not like if you do physics, you're a physicist for the rest of your life, right? And so physics and management studies in particular seemed like it had a lot of good applications. And for a 17, 18-year-old, not really sure what I want to do with my life, but know that I wanted to go to university and have a chance at least doing a degree. That seemed like a sort of feeding into the natural interests that I had, but also keeping my options open in case I wanted to go into business or finance or lots of the other things that people in
Yeah.
physics go on to do. So it was kind of fun as well to do because it meant that I was moving in the physics crowd and having physics friends, but also meeting people from other disciplines that had chosen to do this sort of add-on of business. So people from engineering,
Yeah.
people from the business school, and things like that. So it was nice because you sort of doing physics, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm doing accountancy this afternoon, which is still sort of very math based, obviously, but with a very different bent to it. So I really enjoyed the degree, and I'd recommend those sort of joint degrees to anyone thinking about it, because it just at that point, just keeping your options open is a really good thing to do.
Yeah, brilliant. It's such a good idea because, business you can use anywhere. Like it's so applicable in so many places, so many and so portable as well. And, when I was at uni, I was doing computer science, like it didn't occur to me to do that kind of combination.
Mm.
And it was only like afterwards I did an Asian studies degree as well because I'm crazy. Um, but I wanted to add some business units on as well, and I thought that would make it a bit more flexible, more useful. And I had to fight for it. Like I literally
Mm.
had to argue to be able to add on these business units to be able to augment the degree because they were just very rigid about wanting that. And there are so many options now, and it's just great that people are thinking about the fact that you need to be able to have these extra skills.
Yeah, and I think the universities are sort of understanding that you want to equip these young people that are frankly right now paying all this money to go to university
Yeah.
to make it worth it, right? You need to be able to come out the other side and get a job that helps you pay off the loans you've just accrued, and so making things that are applicable to the real world is good. And even stay so I went on to stay in science, but having that idea of a business background, accounts, a lot of what I do is project management, and it never occurred to
Yeah.
me that being a professional science means that you're a project manager. And so having that business background, even if you stay in science, is really useful. Budget, coming up with budgets, working through how to budget a 5-year multi-million-dollar grant isn't necessarily obvious, right? So
No.
it's proved very useful in ways that I had no idea about when I was 18 and applying for degrees. So yeah, definitely worked out for me. That was lucky.
Yeah, definitely. It was very lucky. And yeah, and it is a thing that people will forget. Like you think that you become a scientist, you just do research, you can hunker down and that's what you have to focus on. But no, you've got to do all these other boring, dry things to do with project management and business administration and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're hiring postdocs, you're hiring students, you're responsible for them as employees, right? You're responsible for
Yeah.
making sure that they have a career option ahead of them. You can't just hire them for 6 months and go, "Oh dear, we've run out of money. Good luck with that." That's not a responsible thing to do. And so, yeah, it's definitely an important trait. And I think as we certainly as I move through my career, that's what a piece of advice I'd give people is, always always think about sort of the business applications of what you're doing because you just never know. You just never know.
Yeah, you definitely don't know. So, yeah, from there, what, like, because you said you didn't really know where you're going to take physics. So, what led to planetary sciences then?
So I grew up in Essex, and if you're not familiar with the UK, it's just northeast of London, and there's not a lot of planetary science there. That's a fair thing to say. It was sort of not an environment. I didn't grow up in a where SpaceX down the road or anything like that. It's a sort of rural farming community when I was a kid, and I just followed things that interested me, and somehow that weaved me into planetary science. And I think if I'd have been there easily could have been a different set of solutions that led me into something else. But I'm very happy with where I am, and it's been a lot of fun. And like I say, I really like problem solving, and that was that was something that just pushed me into planetary because there are so many unknown questions, and it's sort of
Yes.
it's a great way of exploring. So much of the Earth is now been explored, and there are still some frontiers, but largely we know most of it. We have satellites, we have deep sea submarines. Lots of it's been explored, but that's not true of the outer solar system. And so it's kind of a nice way of exploring safely. You're sitting in a comfortable chair indoors, sending these
Yes,
space robots
definitely.
out to go and explore the universe, and that was pretty fun. It's just been something that's continually changing and challenging and exciting. So I think the questions drew me in, but really the exploration kept me there. It's been pretty cool.
That is very cool. So, given that, you didn't really have much exposure to, planetary space kind of exploration, like how did you get there at uni?
So my degree was the local university. It wasn't, and so I stayed in Essex. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Essex. So I just went through the regular, school system in the UK. I didn't go to a private school. I guess it'd be called public schools here, but um, and and then went in and did physics. That was sort of following just what I liked at school and not really knowing where it's going to lead me. But I specialized in my master's year, which is quite common. So I did a 3-year undergraduate bachelor's, and then when I was thinking about what the next steps was, I was applying for jobs at the same time. Sort of again, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and there was a really cool master's at University College London, and it kind of coincided with I had a major car accident. Someone drove into the back of me, and
Oh,
I ended up getting quite a large payout, which was it coincided with sort of trying to figure out what to do. So I plowed all that money into doing a master's, which I'd never have been able to afford to do normally. So it was a bit of a
wow.
random random way in. So yeah, the car
Yeah.
was written off, and I got injured, and anyway, the check came through, and I basically just then went on accommodation and tuition fees, and so I did a master's in something that just looked really interesting to me. It was space science, and it was
Wow.
just that idea of getting to explore and do something different. And I mean, at the time, there was no big downside to doing a master's. I was already in the university system. It meant
Yeah.
delaying getting a proper job for a year, and it meant that it cost me some money. But it was also a new experience. I was moving to London, and a different course, and um, so for me, it was just a way of dipping my toe in, and it was really fun. So at the time, it was the early 2000s, and the UK had just invested in Beagle 2, which was a Mars lander that was UK led. And it was done on an incredibly shoestring budget. And so there was
Yeah.
really no money. So students were allowed to have responsibilities that normally you would never get on a mission because
Yeah.
it would
They
be
had no
too
money.
risky. Yeah, but they had no
Yeah.
money, so they were sort of willing to, like, if you're going to work, we'll let you do it. So I got to do some
Nice.
hardware development for a lander, which would never normally be easily accessible, at least to a student level, and it was just really fun.
Yeah.
So the cameras were being developed by University College London, and they wanted a wiper that went on the cameras. Mars is very dusty. They wanted something, just a manual wiper, like think cut what windscreen wiper on a car to just get rid of the dust, right? Just something manual to literally scrape off the dust. And I
Yeah.
just got to test these different materials, like what's the best wiper for getting rid of dust on Mars. That was sort of the question that was posed, and
Yeah.
it was just a really fun project. And from there, I thought, well, this looks all right, and started applying for PhDs to kind of stay in and carry on the research. Again, not really knowing if I wanted to be in academia per se, but like, this is interesting. I'm intrigued. Like, let me
Yeah.
find out more, and put in a few applications, and I got a studentship to do it. So that again was a really big thing. I don't come from money. I could never have afforded to pay my own PhD if I hadn't have got sponsorship from the UK government. Again, it's just not a dream I could have afforded to follow. And so I was
Yeah.
lucky enough to get some funding, and I was able to do it. And so it was sort of a bit of coincidence and luck, and I don't know, just the universe pushed me in
Giving
that
it a
way, if you
go.
like, or whatever it is you want to think about. But yeah, I mean, it could have
Yeah.
easily have ended up with a different set of situations, but it's been really fun, and I've really enjoyed it. My mum blames Doctor Who. She was a she's a sort of a bit of a closet geek, not she's not
Yep.
um, mathematically trained at all. She's not a scientist. She's actually a social worker now. So, but we were pretty religious on our Doctor Who watching, and she firmly blames Doctor Who for all this shenanigans. So maybe there's a bit of truth in that.
And
Yeah.
clearly they've achieved the objective because it was meant to be making science more accessible, right?
Yeah, and it was a little bit scary, when you're a kid. It's still a little bit
Yeah,
scary, I think, but
I think it was.
it just showed the possibilities, right, of exploration and travel, and I think I'm glad that they've moved into a regime where the companions are slightly more hands-on than they were. But yeah, and we finally have a female doctor, which I'm very excited about. And yeah,
Yeah,
I think it achieved its aim for me, at least. It was definitely a gateway
absolutely.
into making science cool and fun and accessible.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. Like, you never know what those influences are going to lead you to once you actually start trying stuff out.
No, my mum was great, right? She used to come up with, we didn't have any money, my dad, well, my dad worked hard, he's an electrician, but it's just, we were, we were, we weren't loaded. And she used to make all these costumes, like washing up bottles covered in tinfoil became like air backpacks, and it was all, she was just very inventive, very happy to just try and find ways to indulge indulge her
Oh,
weird
that's
kids. And
brilliant.
yeah, lots of boot sale crazy outfits that became alien outfits, and it was all good. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So definitely my
Oh,
mum, and some
awesome.
Doctor Who influences to blame there too. Plus just a natural tendency to, like, I'm a maths geek. I like numbers. I like, they make sense to me, and that sort of all fitted together really. So bit of a perfect storm.
That is very cool. So, when you were doing the wiper stuff, like with physics, because that's not my area, I didn't know, whether you get into the hardware stuff and the, you know, instrumentation. So, is that something that they covered when you were doing the course and you just kind of applied those skills, or were you just winging it?
Just winging it. Yeah, I mean, there's not a course on windscreen wipers on Mars, right? That's not something you
Oh
sign
no.
up for. But I mean, we've done some things about sort of, basic sort of introduction to planetary science. So, what's the weather like on Mars? What are the dust conditions? What do we know? And so we've done that. And then, like most research, you just sort of go in with what you know, and you try and apply that the best you can, and you do some trial and error stuff. So we had some Mars simulants. So they sort of, there's we know a little bit about the composition, and you can infer some stuff, and so there's these ideas that you've got, like, basically Mars soil, but it's not really Mars soil. It's like what we think Mars soil might look like, and then you stick it on a window and start wiping with different things, and like, this one works, this one doesn't, like, this one scratches the glass, this one doesn't, those sorts of things. So it's a bit of what a bit of,
Student work.
best effort, just give it a try and see what happens. And
Nice.
so yeah, it's, and then it gets more and more complicated. So first of all, you start in a lab, and then you go, well, okay, but would but well, really, we would be working in much more close to a vacuum than Earth pressure. So then, do you move into a chamber? Like, you sort of make it gradually. That's the trouble with research, is you start off at one point, every time you can make it a little bit better, a little bit more realistic. And where do you stop? And that's a challenge that I think a lot of us face, is knowing where to stop and write things up is always hard. But yeah, it was definitely fun, and it was one of those things, I think, as a sort of a younger early career scientist, that's very tactile, right? Like, it's not, I like problems where I can really visualize what's going on, and that's why I didn't really go into like magnetospheric physics, or I don't know, lots of also sort of those or higher end like theoretical physics where you can't really picture it. But the idea of like there's dust, it's on a lens, you need to get rid of dust is very easy to picture, and I think
It's very
that's
tangible.
yeah, it's very tangible. It's very easy to relate to, and that appealed to me. So that was pretty fun.
That is cool. So from there, how did you get from wipers to liking, like having a focus on icy worlds? Like that's a very specific focus.
It is a very I mean, you've got to focus on something, right? But um, so again, very tangential. So I was applying for PhDs, and there was a PhD studentship. So when I was applying, most of the PhDs had specific projects. So you'd look up and they'd say, "We have funding for somebody to do this project," and you read the project and you go, "That appeals to me. That doesn't." Okay, I'll apply or not apply, right? And one of the ones that came up was for a project to do that was half in the US, based at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is a NASA facility in LA, and the other half was at the University of Oxford, and it was paid for sponsored by the US government, sorry, the UK government with some US funding, and it just hit the right notes for me. Like I thought that'd be incredibly exciting. I'd never been to Oxford, didn't think I stood a chance. Girl, comprehensive from Essex, like just. But you think, well, whack an application in. The worst they can say is no. So I did
Yeah.
that, and then they invited me for an interview, and I thought, well, the worst that can happen is I get a lunch out in Oxford. Like that sounded all right.
Yeah.
So went and interviewed and got a lunch out in Oxford, and then was offered the gig. And so thought, well, I'll go, and if it's just full of people that I can't relate to or I don't like it, like no harm, no foul, right? Like give it a try.
Yeah.
And it was just really nice. It was really fun. Great group of people, really diverse backgrounds, which wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be full of snobs, people that wouldn't like me, people that I couldn't relate to, but it wasn't at all. It was just people that were really interested in understanding the world and fascinated by questions and how to figure them out. And that was really nice. And it was a really friendly environment in which to study. And so it smashed all my expectations of what these sort of Oxbridge universities were like. And then I got to go a few months a year to hang out in LA, got a NASA badge, messed around in a lab out there with a really wonderful advisor that was sort of, I don't know, I feel like he was my adopted granddad. He was just really sweet to his students and really nurturing and really I don't know, in this day and age, he was really appropriate, which sounds like it's a baseline, but it was just really when you're working in a lab with someone at weekends, evenings, sometimes like the experiments would go long, they would go into the middle of the night. Like you are incredibly vulnerable as a female student, or as a student, but especially as a female student, and to be working with someone that was just completely professional, very very kind, very a great mentor. He was a really great mentor, made such a world of difference to me, and he
Yeah.
really it was just great mentorship, and I really continue to appreciate the effort and work that he put into to allowing me to build up his lab and to work with him and to benefit from that. So uh, just again, just a lot of luck, like getting to work with great people without knowing them, just applying for things and just
Yeah.
trying them out. And but it was a really fun project because I'd get to be in the States and have this experience that frankly not many people do, right? Like I'd been
Yeah.
to the US once before that, and all of a sudden I was there for a few months with a hotel and a car and in LA, and it's February and it's raining in the UK, but here I am, it's Saturday morning and I'm driving to the beach because why not? And I don't know, it was just this sort of,
Yeah.
well, if nothing else comes of it, this is just this really amazing experience, and just enjoy the experience. And then if it doesn't work out, it's all good. And I think that's just been my mantra each step, like just doing the things that I like, follow what you're interested in, and just enjoy the opportunity. And if you're enjoying it, it'll probably work out. It's all good. So yeah, I stayed on at Oxford
That's a
after I
very
finished my
chill
PhD.
outlook. That's great.
Well, I think I, I mean, when you sort of feel like you've snuck in, I think maybe it's just, I think lots of people feel like they've snuck into their position, that they don't really, there's a word for it, isn't there?
The
I'm
imposter
losing the
syndrome.
term. Imposter syndrome, thank you. And that was rife with
Yeah.
me, right? I just felt like at all points, like, well, because I did business and not straight physics, maybe my course was easier. So when I got a first, maybe it was because that course, like if I'd have done straight physics, maybe I wouldn't have got a first, and that got me into my master's. And okay, I got distinction in my master's, but I got a lot of great supervision, and so maybe that was the reason that I got it. And then I got into physics at Oxford, and like, well, and then I had really great supervision there, and I had two mentors, and some people only have one mentor, and so maybe that was the reason I passed my PhD. And you can come up with these excuses, and if it was on someone else, you'd go, look, you're just doing something, and you've worked hard, and you're doing something
Yeah.
that you're good at, and just you're supposed to be doing this is all working. But because it's you're sort of like, well, I'm sure someone else would do it much better than me. And I just, so at every point I've just been like, well, I'll try it. And then when someone realizes that she shouldn't really be doing this, because you're not supposed to be here, are you, love? Like, then I'll just go, okay, thank you very much, and I'll leave. And so it's just been, and that's been my career really. I'm just sort of trying to fake
Oh
it,
my
and
goodness.
hopefully but it's working out. So I'm just going to carry on faking it, and we'll see how it goes. So far so good. It's been 20 years and no one's called me out on it yet, so maybe I'm in the clear.
I'm
No.
pretty sure you've been in the clear for quite a while.
So yeah, so I thought, well, I'll just stay on and do this postdoc and see where I want to go with it, really. Just take a bit of time and think about it. And at the time, I was working on a mission called Cassini, which was at Saturn, and I was analyzing data that was in the thermal, and a PhD. It was sort of solving a two-body problem a little bit. Like I was with someone at the time, and we were looking about where we could both get jobs. Right, it's sort of a classic science problem. Is you're in a couple, and you're in different fields, and you both want a career, and so how do you both find jobs in the same place that's going to further your career? And so we'd been looking at various solutions to this, and one that came up was moving to Boulder, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver, in the middle of the states. And it solved the two-body problem. We'd both end up with jobs that were good career moves, but also the salaries in the US are much higher. For anyone working in science, you'll know that it's about a factor of 2 different.
Yeah.
Which when you don't come from money and you're looking to try and buy a house in the UK is very appealing, because I just didn't have any savings, and so I couldn't buy a house because I didn't have a deposit. So I thought, right, if you move to the States and work, if you're on a certain type of visa, you don't pay tax for 2 years. So okay, let's go, let's move, let's take the money and run. Basically, let's go to this salary that's 2 times higher with no tax. Earn that money, put it in a bank account, come back, buy a house. But then we get there, and like all good stories, the twist is that we broke up whilst we were there, and I then met my now American husband, the American boyfriend, and ended up staying for a decade. But you don't know where life's going to take you. And so I
Yeah.
stayed with this thermal imager and moved to Colorado, and it was just a blast. I went to the Southwest Research Institute, which I hadn't really heard of, but it turns out they're just this really, people. There's some institutions that just punch above their weight. It's about 80 people,
Yeah.
but yet I think they're now running 4 missions out of that office, which is just an astounding amount. And they were just
It is.
it was just like 80 planetary scientists. Most universities have maybe 2 or 3 if it's a planetary science, but
Yes.
80. It was just like, oh, like if you're interested in this, there's probably someone that does it. You're interested in that, there's someone that does it.
Yeah.
And it was just this place where I don't know, it was just really exciting to be in, and it's still exciting to be in it. And really a dynamic, really just lovely people as well, that they've made a point of hiring people that are just not jerks, and it makes the environment to work in really nice. It's like, oh wait, you're nice, and you like space. I like space. You like going to the pub and having a beer. I like going to the pub and having a beer. We should be friends. And it's just like full of those people, and it's just really nice. And so
Oh,
that was the last decade. It just, when you work with good people and you're surrounded by excellence, it's just, it makes just working fun. And I got to be involved in some missions that were just amazing missions, like going out to investigate Pluto. That was a real, life highlight. And subsequently, I'm on Lucy, which is a new mission that will launch this year in October 2021, to go and look at asteroids near Jupiter. And that's been, again, a really just fun new branch of science that wasn't my science, but I'd been involved in a similar instrument before, and so I got to play on this too. So it's just like the planetary science is fun because it just keeps changing. Yesterday is
Yeah.
not the same as today, and it won't be the same as tomorrow, and that appeals to me. So that's nice. So it's good, and now I'm part-time back at Oxford. So I got a professorship in July last year, which July 2020 as 2020 full stop's a bit of a train wreck, right? So it's been an
Yeah.
interesting transition, but yeah, it'll be fun when things open up again and I can be back in the department and getting my feet under me. But it's been, having spent the last 12 years in the States, it's quite interesting to relearn the European way of doing things. So yeah, it's the culture's different, and it's interesting to be back. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a fun adventure. Yeah, I mean, it's just no one tells you like, oh, if you go into planetary science, you'll get these experiences. Like I just thought it was interesting and there were questions and I liked it, but the 2 years ago, we flew past a small classical Kuiper Belt object. So Kuiper Belt is a region of space that sort of Pluto inhabits, so very long way from the Earth. And after New Horizons flew past Pluto, we went on to look at a very different type of object in this same region of space. And that happened to occur on New Year's Eve because planetary missions have to wreck holidays. That's like a rule. And so we went over with my in-laws and my parents and spent one New Year's Eve investigating this classical Kuiper object. And we took
Nice.
she must have been 3 at the time, our 3-year-old. And Brian May, who's the lead guitarist from Queen, happens to be on the team. He's an astrophysicist, and
Yes.
and so he released a song, and there's my 3-year-old, at this very small event with Brian May releasing a song, and it was like, no one said when you go into planetary science you get to meet rock stars. Like that wasn't a thing. No one said, oh, by the way, these are some of the perks. Right? So like I say, it's just a really weird career. And my kids think it's perfectly normal. Like, oh yes, we're going to see a rocket go up in October and we'll be, guests at this rocket launch. Like that's not normal. That's just not a normal childhood experience. Like I'm trying to explain to a teacher, well, I'd like to take her out of school because we're going to go and see a rocket launch. And she's like, well, rockets launch quite a lot. Can't you go in the school holidays? It's like, no, my husband and I both work this mission. Like this isn't just this is the rocket launch that we've been.
This is not
like,
just an excursion. This is the culmination of our work.
So, and they're like, really? And you're like, yeah, really. Like we're weird people. So it's just funny. So it just continues to be just an amazing experience, but also strange and but it's just like a lot of other jobs, right? Most of my day is spent checking email and banging my head on the table because I wrote a piece of code and I missed that bug on line 2 and now I have to rerun everything and oh my goodness. So it's this mixture of the very mundane and the very exciting. But yeah, but our kids have this weird upbringing where half their t-shirts are NASA t-shirts because every time we go to a conference you're like, oh, but it's so adorable, like they have to have that
It's
one.
so cute.
It's ridiculous. So yeah, it's all good, but it's fun, and yeah, I hope it continues because I'm enjoying it.
Oh
Hope
yeah,
no
it
one
sounds like it's going to
realizes
keep
that
going that way.
that I sort of snuck in when no one was looking.
I'm pretty sure that's not going to be a problem anymore.
Yeah, we'll see.
There's that imposter syndrome.
It's a tough one, I tell you. It's just a tough one, and yeah, I think I didn't. I was really relieved when I knew it had a name because it was just this sort of thing I was feeling for a long time. It's like, wait, oh, you don't feel like you belong either? Oh, that's nice. Like I thought it was just me, and everyone else knew exactly what they were doing. So yeah, I'm glad it has a name and that we're talking about it. I think it's helpful.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I think they were saying that about 40% of people experience this. It's like, wow, really? You think you don't belong here either? Excellent.
Yeah, I'm just amazed that 60% of people do think they belong here. That's a level of egotism that I aspire to.
I would like that level of confidence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Maybe one day. Maybe by the time I retire.
Perhaps then, perhaps not.
Perhaps then, yeah.
Oh, yes. So, how do you get a professorship?
How does one do that? Um,
Yes.
so it's a reasonable question. So it's a lot like any other job application. They put them out and you apply. The things you need to tell them about are probably less typical. So of course, teaching, your teaching experience, your teaching passions, like um, how do you like to teach? There's sort of different, ethoses within teaching. How do you engage students? How would you try and work with students that are struggling? Those sorts of things. So there's usually a teaching aspect to it. What are you willing to teach? What would you be less comfortable teaching? Physics is a broad subject. I'm currently teaching optics and electromagnetism. That was kind of interesting. And again, like imposter syndrome rife, sort of think, well, I'll put in an application, but I'm sure there are much more qualified people to do this than me. And then you get the interview and you go, well, okay, they're going to pay for my flights, nothing else. I'll go back to Oxford and it'll be nice to be back and I'll get to see my parents and that will be nice. And, okay. And then they offer it to you and you go, what now? I went and talked to my husband. At the time, our baby was 3 months old when I applied. I literally wrote the application with my newborn on my body. Like she would nap on me, and I would be trying to write like on the computer. And I don't know. And you sort of feel like I'm at this a disadvantage. Like I'm sure everyone else applying isn't typing their application with a newborn on them, right? And I'm trying to type quietly, like click, 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 click. Don't want to wake the baby. Don't want to wake the baby. Don't want the baby. Tick, 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 tick. And you think, well, like I'm not going to get it because I'm at this inherent disadvantage. I'm sleep deprived. Like my body is hurting. The baby's only 3 months old. Like any new parent or especially any new parent that's given birth will tell you, like it takes a while for everything to get back into place. Like, and there I am trying to type this application, going, well, I don't know if it's even worth it. They're probably not going to give me the job, et cetera, et cetera. And then you put this application in and they get the interview and you're like, well, is it, I literally emailed someone I work with at the university and said, is this job meant for somebody? Because sometimes that's how it works. They really have someone in mind, but they have to go, like, I'm not going to leave my 3-month-old to go to a job application if I don't stand a chance, right? Like that's just not,
Yeah.
my family comes first, and that's not up there. I could do the interview over Skype. I know I'd be at an inherent disadvantage, but if I'm not going to get the job, maybe that's okay. And they're like, no, I think you'd stand an okay chance. So it's like, all right. So I fly over for 2 nights, which is a lot. If I'm
It
literally pumping on the
is.
plane, which is not fun if you've
Yeah.
ever had to do that. Like the person sitting next to me is, like it looks, and I'm very aware it looks like I'm, using some electronic device under a blanket. You're sort of trying to explain to the person that you think is gonna, like this isn't anything bad. I'm breastfeeding and I have to pump or else my boobs are gonna explode. And the old person next to you is like, lady, like that was TMI about 30 seconds ago. I don't know. And then like I have to pump before my interview, and I spill breast milk on my shirt, and so I'm in the bathroom trying to like scrub it out on my
Oh
shirt
no.
and dry my shirt under the hand dryer when someone walks in who's clearly on the interview panel, like morning, morning, like carry on blow dry, nothing to see here. I don't know. And so at all points, this imposter syndrome is like, you're already at this disadvantage. I don't know, I'm jet lagged, I'm pumping, like I don't know. I just felt like, I wrote this application with a baby on me, like I don't stand a chance. And yet sometimes the world surprises you and you end up with a professorship. So yeah, it's
That's cool.
just throwing your hat in the ring. You never know what's going to happen, right? So and I
Exactly.
must say I tried to be mindful of the fact. So the job spec was, I didn't meet all the criteria on the job specification. I just didn't. And I was like, okay, that rules me out. And then I'd read this article about how women don't do this. So men would go, but I meet most of them, and
Yep.
thus I should apply. And women don't. They go, but I don't meet two of them, and thus I'm not going to get the job. And I was like, no, I've read this article. I understand how this game works. So I thought I'd put my application in and just see what happens. And I got the job. So again, just, not being put off, just throwing a hat in the ring and going, maybe I am what they're looking for. And don't tell yourself a story about what it is someone else is looking for. Don't rule yourself out before you've even applied. And so that's how I got a job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, the interview was a bit weird because they wanted to pretend you were teaching. And so they kept asking me all these questions. And at one point I'm trying to rub out the workings on the board, and I'm using the wrong side of the board rubber. That's how so I even got that wrong.
Oh
Like,
no.
I didn't even use the furry bit, I used the back of it, and I'm like trying to rub it out, and I'm like, this isn't rubbing now.
Oh my
And they're
gosh.
like, just turn the board rubber over, then it'll just rub out, no problem. Crazy. And you're here to do hardware that goes into space. That's a board rubber, and you're not getting it right. Like, I'm like, no, I'm just nervous. Sorry, I'm not really
Oh,
this
that's
rubbish. Like,
hysterical.
honestly. So, again, just give it a
That's
go. Who
awesome.
knows what will happen? It does make you wonder how awful the other candidates were. Maybe they used the board rubber in even worse ways. But
You
no,
never
it was.
know.
You never
Maybe they
know.
couldn't
You
get the
just
lid
never
off the
know.
pen.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, like, even with all of that imposter syndrome, props are actually going for it anyway. I mean, so much of imposter syndrome, even for me, like, there'll be things like, no, I couldn't possibly, so I won't, and I don't. But yeah, the fact that you
Yeah.
have those thoughts and you go, well, actually, maybe I'll just try it anyway, just in case, I might slide in.
And I think it comes from having this dialogue, right? From us talking about it. Like I say, I'd been reading these
Yeah.
articles on how women don't put themselves forward for pay rises. They don't apply for jobs that or promotions that are slightly, out of sync with what they do. And I was trying to sort of be mindful of that. Like, think about, like, okay, this is my natural tendency, but is this right? Is this what my go-to is? My husband, he's an engineer in aerospace, and so what we do is quite similar. Like, would he be put off by that? No, he wouldn't be. He would just, he's one of those people, he's in the 60%, he thinks he's great, and he is, but he thinks he's great, and he would just think they would be lucky to have me. Like, that's his, like, outlook on life. And I've been trying to, like, channel that a little bit, like, no, it's worth a go, because you don't know. And so, yeah, I've been trying to sort of see it from someone else's point of view to get out of that imposter syndrome. Like, no, it's worth a
Absolutely.
go. Yeah. So, yeah,
Excellent.
but again, that came from other people talking about it, from reading articles and being like, okay, this is, and that resonated with me. And so I think it's, like I say, I think it's really important to have these conversations.
It is, absolutely. So, I mean, with the massive, like, distance and time zone difference between, Oxford and Colorado, what prompted the application? Like, that seems like a massive juggle. Like, you could have tried for a professorship locally, but,
Yeah. So I was offered a professorship locally, actually, and I turned it down a few years ago. And at the time, apparently I apply for professorships when I'm pumping. That's apparently a thing. I applied for the first one just after I had my first baby, and I was offered it. But it's hard when you're not sure you're in the right spot. So what I didn't want to do was take on students in Colorado, knowing that I didn't feel like Colorado was home, and I didn't want to take on students and then leave. And so
yeah,
I was uh, I kind of toyed around and about whether to take it there, but I don't know. My eldest really loves Moana, and Moana has this big self of identity. She knows who she is and what she wants to do and where she's supposed to be and where's home. And I've never really found my spot. I've never really found my home. I've moved around a lot, and I didn't feel like Colorado was my forever place, and I didn't want to take that step there. And so, sometimes these decisions are very from the head, and sometimes they're from the heart.
it
And
is.
so, turning down that one was a hard decision, and coming to Oxford was a hard decision. Like, I felt like it could be my forever place, and I wanted to try it.
Yeah, sometimes that is the important thing there, right? No, you can't always use your head. Sometimes you really do need to listen to the heart for that.
Yeah, and I mean, the other school in Colorado is a good school. Like, they do a lot of planetary science, and there's some really lovely people that had been a lot of fun to work with. So I still have mixed feelings about turning it down, but what's done is done, and yeah, we'll see how this new position works out.
And it's awesome that you get to actually kind of go back home for a bit anyway, just to try it out. That's cool.
Yeah, it's such a privilege, and it's just been really sucky timing. Anyone that started a new job in the last year will attest that it's just a rubbish time to start a new job because the nice thing about
Yes.
new jobs is you get to meet people and do the things and like, yeah, I don't know, have those dynamic conversations of like, oh, you're doing a cool thing.
Yeah.
Can I come and help you with your cool thing? And now it's like, oh, I
Yeah.
just have some bonus Zoom meetings. Like, whoop, whoop. So it'll get
Yes.
easier, and it is already getting easier. And restrictions are being lifted in the UK, and it's just.
Yes.
I think by the next academic year, by sort of September, October, I'm hoping things will be a lot better. It'll be really nice to just start teaching in person. I've been teaching
Oh,
these
yeah,
students for a
absolutely.
year, and I've never met them, and so
Yeah.
it'll just be nice.
The
That's the
dynamics are
nice
a
thing
bit
about
different that way.
teaching. It's very down to business. Like, okay, everyone's here, let's go, rather than like, oh, last week you told me you were, I don't know, in that play or playing that sport, or we don't. It's a little bit harder to have those informal conversations. So
It is.
it'll be nice to do that once things open up again. So yeah, hopefully it's coming.
Yes, hopefully it's coming. And so you've got your professorship, but you're also an instrument scientist for.
Lucy, Lucy, yeah. So that was the yeah. So I've got some mission hats that are kind of fun.
Ooh.
So yeah, and there's actually a big deadline coming up, and I'll get to that. So there might be another mission on the docket. We'll find out in the next few weeks, I think.
Oh,
So,
very exciting.
but so I'm still doing some Cassini work. So Cassini ditched into Saturn in 2017, but there's still a lot of data to be analysed. So I'm still doing a little bit of that. I was a
Nice.
co-I and co-investigator on Cassini, and that was really the one that that was sort of spanned my early career science. I, I have a very big soft spot for Cassini and everyone on the mission because it was just a really fabulous international. I mean, it really did highlight what can happen when international collaborations occur. It was a big ESA, European
Yeah.
Space Agency, NASA mission, and so I started working on that when I was at Oxford. They built part of one of the instruments, and then carried on working on that in the States, and it was just I don't know, the people on it were just great, and it was fun. And New Horizons, we've already spoken a little bit about that. That went past
Yep.
Pluto, and then went on to explore Arakoth, this cold classical Kuiper Belt object featuring Brian May. And we're still taking data with that, and so that's kind of fun. We're still planning observations, and then there are two that are not off the ground yet, literally. So Lucy will launch in 2021, in October 2021, so later this year, and that'll look at Jupiter asteroids. So those are asteroids that are the same distance from the sun as Jupiter, but they don't orbit Jupiter. They orbit ahead and behind in Jupiter's orbit. So they sort of lead the way or trail Jupiter. And they've never really been explored. They're quite small. And we're going to explore 6 of them over about a decade. And it'll be really just, again, new exploration. These guys are really hard to see from the Earth because they're small and dark. And we'll get some great images and compositional data and really try and figure out what's going on with them. So that'll be fun. And then the final one is Europa Clipper, which is a NASA flagship mission, which means it's well, I guess it's called Large Strategic Mission now. But anyway, it means it's a big mission, lots of
Yep.
instruments, and I'm a co-investigator on that and on the thermal instrument, and that'll launch, we hope, in 2023. So that's still a little ways out, but we'll see. And that's going to investigate Jupiter's moon Europa, which is an ice-covered world, we think, with an ocean, and we think with plumes. And so it's a big source for astrobiology. So that means the possibility of life outside of the Earth. And so we'll
Yeah.
be looking for activity on Europa, hotspots and warm regions, and investigating the plumes. And sort of basically doing reconnaissance, for what comes next for
Understanding
understanding life outside our own Earth. So it's a pretty exciting mission that again
That
is yet
is.
to launch. And the final one is a mission called Trident, which is going to hopefully investigate a moon of Neptune called Triton. So
Oh.
lots of
Yep.
tries.
Triton.
Triton, and Triton's really interesting because we think it originated in the Kuiper Belt. So referring back to an earlier conversation, Kuiper Belt is this region of space that's sort of the same distance as Pluto, so very long way away.
Yeah.
And we think that this body started life there, and something happened. It got kicked into the inner solar system, Neptune captured it. It happened to fly close to Neptune. It got pulled in by its gravity and now is a moon of Neptune. And we know it has plumes. Voyager 2 flew past it in 1989 and saw plumes going off. And so, again, just this really interesting world that we don't really understand, a big possibility for habitability. We think it has liquid water ocean. That's part of the mission plan, is to go and figure out if it does. And we know it has plumes, and so it could be a place where life under the ice could exist. And so we want to go back and investigate. So we put in a proposal. NASA said, your proposal is interesting and we'll give you a little bit of money to do a year's worth of sort of further work. And so they down selected 4 missions to do that. And we will find out which missions get to go on and actually become real missions, sort of
Cool.
start hardware, hopefully in the next few weeks. So
That's cool.
yeah, there's lots of like pressing refresh on email. Do we know yet? Do we know yet? Do we know yet? Do we know yet? No, we don't. So yeah, so if that happens, that would be really exciting. And I'm slated to be the deputy of that mission. So that would be
Oh, very
that would be
nice.
a big move for me. But yeah, it will be fun. And again, just anytime you go to the outer solar system, the times to get there are really long. So the flyby isn't until 2038. So
Wow.
as I mentioned, we have young children, and so when we were writing this proposal, I was pregnant, and then when we found out we got a little bit of funding, I actually found out when I was nursing her, and then by the time it launches, so at launch she'd be we actually kind of, it coincides with the school year quite well. Like at launch, she would be in starting primary school, and when we get to
Yep.
Jupiter, she would be going to high school, and when we got to Neptune, she would be 19, so she would be an adult. So it's sort of
Wow.
this really, like, it literally spans her childhood. If it gets funded, it'll be just these really big milestones. It sort of reminds you that life is happening in the meantime. This these big
Yeah,
career things, but in
absolutely.
the meantime, your children are growing up and you're, I don't know, just doing the things. So it'd be, we'll see how it goes. See if it gets funded. But yes, if you have some spare fingers and toes to
Yeah.
cross, we would appreciate
Oh, absolutely.
it.
Oh, definitely. That's a really cool
Yeah.
mission that I want to go.
Yeah, no, it's a really exciting one, and it's this very small, lightweight spacecraft. Typically, to go to the outer solar system, you need a lot more money than this. This one is a cheap version of a mission because we're flying a very small spacecraft, and literally the stars align. It's the Jupiter's in the right part of the sky to give us that gravitational kick to get out to Neptune in a reasonable amount of time, and so it just sort of one childhood lifetime, one childhood instead of two. And so we're sort of a combination of stars aligning, or planets aligning, really, and just this, yeah, the fact that we can use nuclear power in this type of mission, because by the time you get
Yes.
out to Neptune, there's not enough sunlight for it to be solar powered. So yeah, we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
And yeah, I was wondering how it stayed powered for that long to go that far. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it keeps the spacecraft warm, and it keeps it, yeah, just by virtue of radioactive decay, but it also
Yeah,
gives the electrical power. So yeah, we have, I think,
that's cool.
one RTG. Yeah, the radioisotopic generators, and so hopefully we get to do that. But we'll wait and see what
Awesome.
NASA say. Yeah, yeah. See if they want to play
Very
with us.
cool. Hopefully they do.
Yeah, hopefully they do. Yeah, we'll
Cool.
see.
Yeah. So, what does an instrument scientist do?
So an instrument scientist is sort of the bridge between the instrument team, so that's typically engineers, and the science team, so the scientists. So it can work either way, but in my instance, so I have a background of working on a similar instrument where I was doing the calibration and things like that, so instrument operations, but I have a scientist background, so it's sort of bringing that, so say the engineer team think, okay, we have this opportunity to do X. I don't know. Maybe it's run it faster, or the flip side. Maybe the filters aren't letting through as much light as we'd originally hoped. Is that a problem? And so it's my job as the instrument scientist, with other help, of course, to say, okay, so I understand the engineering of this, or you've explained to me the engineering of this, and it's my job to put that into the science field, like what are the implications of that? So say the filters aren't letting through as much light. Does that mean that we're not able to see the object anymore? Does that mean we wouldn't be able to detect a certain species on the surface? So it's sort of that link between science and engineering, the engineering of this, we're building the hardware and these are the real world, trades we're having to make. How does that affect the
Yep.
science? And that's sort of where I sit in that link. And so it's
That's
a
cool.
fun position. So I've got this background in hardware development, so I wouldn't say I
Yeah.
understood everything about what they're building, but it kind of means that I can speak that language and then try and translate it into science. So yeah, it's fun. But again, just COVID ruins things. And so I was supposed to be in the lab, helping out, but of course, travel is much harder. And then of course, the more people in the lab, the more dangerous it is for everyone in the lab. And so
Yep.
it's been the sort of thing that I've been trying to help with remotely. But yeah, the original idea was I would be in the lab getting, usually you'd say dirty hands, but of course with spacecraft everything's clean, so it's sort of clean hands, getting your hands dirty in a clean
Yeah.
way, in the lab helping. But as it is, it's been a bit more remote than I would have liked. But nonetheless, it'll continue to be fun, just because now the hardware is built, but there are still, once it's launched, how do we operate it and what are the best ways to operate it, and how do we maximize the science? And so I'll be able to help with things like that. So that's an instrument
That's awesome.
scientist role, and it means different things on different missions, but that's what it means for Lucy. So that's my hat on that mission.
And that's very, very cool. So, because you can't be in the lab, like how much of the work that you do is meant to be hands-on? How much is stuff that you can kind of do remotely?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, with my new hat on at Oxford, it's supposed to be a lot of hardware development, all of which has been put on hold. So I'm not doing any of that right now because setting up a new lab in COVID times is just really difficult, right? Like you physically have to be there. There's no way of getting around that. But there's no shortage of data to analyze in the meantime. And so I've not been twiddling my thumbs. Instead, I've been, we have a lot of Cassini data. I already mentioned that. Of course, that's all on the ground.
Yeah,
And so I've been able to get on with some other projects. So some of the things have definitely been put on hold. But that doesn't mean I've been bored. It just means that sort of the
other
workload for the
work.
next 3 years has kind of been switched around, and that's just fine. So yeah, it's been all right. But it'll be nice to get into the lab and get hands
Start
clean
building things
again.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. So yeah, it's just a bit of a shame, like usually you'd go out and just be a bit more helpful. But yeah, it's been good, and there's some really great people that are doing the work. So it's not that I'm worried about it. It's just it'd be fun to play with the hardware. Yeah.
Of course, you want to play
Yeah.
with the hardware. That's the good stuff.
It is using the big pieces of kit. I really like, so there's a lot of testing, so TVAC testing, so thermal vacuum testing, and there's also shake and bake, they call it. So
Yep.
it's vibration testing. So of course everything goes onto the rocket and the rocket gets launched, and this isn't a nice smooth ride. It's very violent and physical, and so you have to make sure that everything's going to hold up to that. And that's always really fun because you stick things on these big vibration tables and shake them and see what comes off, and things like that. It's always good to do. And they're also very intense periods, and so it'd be nice to help out for that reason as well. Of course, once something's in thermal vacuum testing, you're using these big facilities that are incredibly expensive, and so you worked. There are 24-hour shift patterns usually at that time because
Yep.
you
You want
don't
to
want
maximize it.
maximize the time, right? Exactly, because the next project is waiting for that facility as well sometimes. So just to be able to help and take some of the pressure off would have been nice, just to be an extra set of hands. But like I say, they've got it, and it's been fine. But yes, I'll get to play next time. But for this one, I've had to just support from
Sit it
afar,
out.
be the official cheerleading group. Looks like you're doing a great job. Go team 2 a.m. Etc. etc. So, yeah. Although it does have to be said, with small children, it's nice not to be traveling as much because you always burn some brownie points by traveling. So yeah, I've been able to be around a bit more, which has been nice. It means my husband doesn't do the "you're going away again" face. So yeah, that's good. I've retained more brownie points than I did when our first was young. Yeah, no, it's all good. So yeah, I don't know. I really do like traveling, and it's something I think we all, lots of people miss, and I'm not unique in that in any way. But it's been a bit weird, hasn't it? Been all staying at home. I was sort of reminiscing how much travel we used to do and how normal it was. One of the reasons we
Yeah,
wanted to move to Europe was that sort of travel you can travel on a train from London 2 hours, you're in Paris, where the language is different, the
exactly.
culture is different. In America, you travel 2 hours and you haven't even left Colorado. Like it's not even a different state, let alone anything different. So that was an experience we
Yep.
wanted to give our children, just, realizing that the world is diverse and we haven't been able to do any of that. It always felt like to me the continent was so close and now it feels so far. And that's just one
Yeah.
of the problems with COVID. But we'll get back to it, I'm sure, and they'll experience that. But yeah, I miss traveling.
Yeah, I can definitely empathize with that. I mean, Australia is sort of the same problem. You drive 2 hours, you're still, well, for us, we're still in the same state because our state's huge.
Exactly.
And I have, because I've done a road trip in the UK, drove with multiple stops from London up to Edinburgh. And every stop as we're heading north, it was a different accent, and I loved it. That was
Yeah.
the thing that entertained me the most, that every time we stopped, the accent changed.
It's definitely true. I mean, my mom moved about 60 miles north of where we grew up, and they would use words that I didn't understand. Like I have no idea what you're talking about. And like this one was like, "Do you have a pack up? Do you have a pack up?" And I was like, "I have a backpack." Pack up, like you're gonna have to help me out. They're like, like a picnic, like a packed lunch. And I was like, oh, packed lunch, like I'd never heard that word
That was
before, in
intuitive.
20 years. And this was just, it was literally like an hour drive, and the words they were using were that different, that I wouldn't be able to understand. And right, the
Yep.
accent's completely different. And just, I don't know, it is nice. Whereas, and it's quite, I'm quite interested in language and linguistics. And one thing I heard about the states, in across Colorado, and so, there are there are linguistical differences across America, but largely it's standardized because of the radio, which is quite interesting. So
Yes.
the US obviously was settled a lot later, and so the people could hear other people speak, whereas in
Hmm.
the UK they that wasn't true, and you grew up in that little local area, and you probably didn't move, and that's where you lived your whole life, and became your bubble. There's also supposed to be
Exactly.
an Antarctic accent now that is quite interesting. That people that go to the South
Interesting.
Pole that winter end up with that their accents kind of unify a little bit, or like they all
Oh,
end
that's
up with the
awesome.
same vowels. It's quite interesting. So the UK does have some really cool accents, some of which are
Yeah.
harder to understand than others, I think.
Did a school trip to UK separate to my road trip, and one of the places that we went to was Newcastle. And I phoned home, and my sister lost it laughing because she said, "You sound like a Geordie." It's like, oh, I see, this is a problem. And
It's
apparently I
funny,
sounded
isn't it?
Geordie for
Yeah,
a couple of weeks after I got back.
yeah. When I first moved to the States, I would catch myself doing that. After 10 years, I didn't. I used a lot of American words because I got bored of the what. Like, what?
Yes.
Elevator. It's okay. I should have used the word elevator, lift. Okay, okay, fine. And but it now when we move back, I sort of have to switch back. Like I
Hmm.
don't know. I use the term trash to talk to someone just on the street. Like I was picking some. I said, oh, just dropped some trash. Like I just stopped to pick it up, and they looked at me, and I was like, oh wait, that sounded very weird, didn't it? Like rubbish. Like I'm having to translate back again. It's kind of funny. Like
Yeah.
yeah, that's the, so yeah, it's pretty funny. But the you think that American English and probably Australian English versus British English is so similar, and yet there are so many differences.
So
It's
different.
hilarious that still we
It
still run
is.
into. My husband and I have been married nearly 10 years, and we still run into like, what on earth is going on? Like I have no idea what you just said, or like you did say that, but I took it to mean this, and you meant it to mean that, and I didn't get that the first time. It's pretty funny. Stomping ground was a new one on him. Like the area you grew up in was your old
Yeah.
stomping ground, and He's like, you used to stomp there? Like, I was like, no. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yep,
It was,
absolutely. Linguistics
yeah,
is fun. I like it.
yeah. It is. But you have to be careful in science with that as well. You know, there's the classic of the inches versus centimeters
Yes,
Mars lander debacle. And yeah, it's good to be clear because you can't assume that you're all talking the same units.
exactly.
Um,
It's a big
yeah,
problem.
it is a big problem, you know, and I mean, I do a lot of work between Europe and the States and have a feeling for what those issues are. But every time you introduce a new Japanese Space Agency, the Indian Space Agency, et cetera, like you introduce a
You have to
new
recalibrate again.
set of biases, yeah, that you've got to make sure you understand. Yeah, what is their default working, you know, units and things like that. So it's interesting. Yeah.
The joys of international collaboration.
Yeah, so it's not just time zones, it's all sorts of things that you have to worry about. But I think it's I think it's nice. I think it brings people together. Science brings people together largely. And I like
It
that. It's
does.
yeah,
It's fun.
yes. For
Get to
all of the
travel, meet
units
people.
debacle. So yeah, and I think it takes you to places that you wouldn't necessarily like go on holiday, but you get to see and be and experience and just I don't know. I like that. You get to takes you out of your comfort zone sometimes and yeah, it's good.
Definitely agree with that. That's great. So we might move on to some of those soft questions. So, what hobby or interest do you have that is most unrelated to your field of work?
I like sporty things. So I before
Ooh.
we had kids and I had more time, I used to do triathlons. So mostly because they're ridiculous. So I don't really like I don't really like doing one thing too much. So I like the idea of doing I'll swim for a bit and then I'll, you know, bike for a bit and then I'll run for a bit. And I always kind of like that. And I used to like doing races that were really stupid. So there was one that was it was a biathlon, so or I guess it's duathlon because biathlon involves shooting, but biathlon, so it was like run bike run bike run, so you're like shoes on chain shoes on, like bike shoes running shoes bike shoes running shoes. I don't know, it was just fun and it was a really fun community and really diverse and just in terms of like age and background and just, you know, not scientists, just people. And anyone that's been to Colorado, you know, is absolutely beautiful. It's at the foothills of the Rockies, and there's something like 300 days of sunshine a year. And when I first got to Colorado, as a Brit, it's like if it's sunny, you go outside, right? That's the mantra. Like you don't sit in on a sunny day because tomorrow it's going to be raining. And so I got there, and it was like every weekend it was sunny. So I'd be like, okay, the first weekend you're like, you're right, okay, we're going to go for a hike, and then it's sunny the next day. Okay, we're going to go and do this thing, and then by the, like 2 months of that, you're like, why isn't it raining? I want to sit and I want to watch telly. And so I think just the sporty, like sport was easy there because everyone did it because it was just set up to do it. It was just, you know, it's
Mm.
the weather was nice and so I really got in. There's a lot of places you could swim, like lakes and things that you could swim that were safe to do with that. And so it was just a fun community to get involved. So now I'm back, and with COVID, of course, it's harder to get in the pool. But yeah, that I was very glad to enjoy things that were outside during COVID because I think some people that, you know, if you really like going to the gym, it's been a rough couple of not rough year, right? But if you quite like
Yes.
going for a run, then you're still able to go for a run, and that's been really nice. So anything outside is the quick answer. But it's also funny because for me it's quite meditative running or swimming. I find them, and I often do some really good science thinking when I'm running. I'll sort of be sitting at a computer and I can't get to the answer. I just can't get to it, and I'll go out for a
Yeah.
run, and about three quarters of the way through, light bulb goes off, and I go, oh, I've been thinking about it wrong. Okay, this is how I do it. And so it's yeah, it's sort of working whilst getting to see the outside. It's sort of funny for me, and but I think sometimes when your brain takes a break, it just keeps churning in the background. You're sort of there's a cog
Yeah,
back here that's
definitely.
still turning over on it. So
Of
anything
course.
outside, climbing. I quite like climbing, but we haven't been able to do a lot of it since we've been back. And yeah, just outsidey things, outside good.
Yes, definitely outside good. Are there many Because I imagine in Colorado they have a lot of actual natural climbing locations. Are there many sort of those sorts of places over, I guess, in Oxford or near Oxford?
So there are some indoor climbing walls in Oxford, and
Yeah,
there is some bouldering. So that's where you're not really going high, but you're sort of going round a bit more.
yeah.
And there is definitely some of that. I mean, Wales, the peaks. There's sort of driving
Ah,
distance
yes, that makes sense.
things to do. With the Littleys, it's quite tricky. Yeah, so just because you have to sort of pay attention to the person on the rope, but also that the small human hasn't just wandered off, or etc. etc. So.
Yes, a bit tricky with that.
Mm.
Yes. Okay, so which childhood book holds the strongest memories for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably The Hobbit. Um, it's a
Ooh,
bit of an obvious sci-fi one, maybe, but it was sort of my gateway into reading sci-fi, and it's quite accessible, and it's not too scary. The sort of,
yeah,
uh, and I think it, the whole Lord of the Rings series has a very powerful personal, I don't know, association for me. My brother got very sick when he was about 14, and I was actually doing my PhD, and had to be in hospital for a while. And we really didn't know what the outcome was going to be. But it was right around the time where the Lord of the Rings trilogy came out, and every day we would watch a Lord of the Rings movie. It sort of had this sort of reinforced this sort of story of, I don't know, that story of struggle and trying to do the right thing, and he ended up getting better, and I don't know, and so that's obviously phenomenal. And I don't know, this idea of this journey and where it would take you, and it sort of resonated
yeah.
with me. And again, that story, the larger Lord of the Rings story, as a spoiler alert, right? Frodo at the end doesn't he comes back home and doesn't feel home. And I think that's always been like the idea of like, where's home and where do you belong and what does that mean? And if you've been out in the world and explored it, is home still, when you get there, is it home again? And I think that's something
Yeah.
that sort of broader, it speaks quite speaks a lot to me. And but as a kid, I've still got the copy of The Hobbit that I read hundreds of times, and it's just a phenomenal story in itself, but it's also this gateway into this like even more phenomenal story. And I don't know,
Yes.
it was, given that my mom is not a sci-fi person, like for her to, but also that me, I don't know, she would read it to me, and it was a thing that we had. And I don't know, it's both a phenomenal story, and it has these sort of other underlying big messages and feelings for
Personal
me.
connections,
So
yeah.
mm, yeah, so I'm quite looking forward to my kids being old enough to fully immerse them in geek literature and lore.
Yes, absolutely. They just have to get big enough to do it. They need to hurry up.
Yes, get bigger, faster. I've got some books to read to you.
We need you to be age appropriate.
Yeah, and there's only so much The Tiger That Came to Tea that you can read before.
Yes, there is only so much of some of those that you can really kind of take.
Yeah, I do spend quite a lot of my time trying to update the story. So Tiger That Came to Tea is a classic, right?
Yeah,
Mummy's at home making the buns and then has to go out and do all the shopping the next day. And in our story, because my kids still can't read, or she's getting there, like there's
yeah.
some gender reversal going on, and daddy goes and does all the shopping the next morning, and it's quite interesting to read all those old classic books and just make them more equitable. So
Yeah.
yeah, once she can start reading, she's going to totally catch me out on it, though. In the meantime, I'll still tell the story that daddy does all the food shopping.
It was funny, because I read a lot of Enid Blyton, and I've been collecting Enid Blyton for my daughter for
I
when
did
she
a
might.
lot of Enid. I've read
I
them
don't.
all,
Yeah.
and that's another one.
Yes.
So my mum used to, until I could read, I firmly believed that, was it Jane and Anne used to go and do the adventures, and Julian and Dick used to make the caves pretty. It's in the famous five,
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's some
Yes.
there's some pretty sexist work going on in Enid Blyton.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because I just pick up copies when I find them. Just it's
Hmm.
a little bit compulsive now. I should stop, but I've got duplicates from which were published from different decades,
Oh,
and
interesting.
yeah, so I found a copy that was published in I think it's the Enchanted Wood, published in the 70s and one published in the 90s. They've changed the names
Hmm.
and they've changed their tasks. And
Oh,
I didn't realize
interesting.
that. Yeah.
Oh, that is
So,
interesting.
yeah. And I didn't realize that because when I grew up with the 90s editions. And I found these older ones that my siblings and my mum used to read. And it's like, oh, this is different. And, Fanny is now Franny. And, they were talking about the girls
That's the
helping the
Secret
mum.
Seven, right? She was in was that
No,
the
this
Secret
was the
Seven?
Enchanted Wood.
The Enchanted Wood.
The
Okay.
Enchanted Wood, yeah.
Okay.
And oh
Hmm.
gosh, I've just mentally blanked. But there's Bessie and Fanny, and I've forgotten the name of the boy. Anyway, but yeah, and so the boys would help dad, and the girls would help mum, and they've changed that slightly as well in the newer edition. It's like, ooh, this is interesting.
That isn't. Oh, I'm glad to hear that because was it the Land of the Faraway Tree was one of the ones I used to
Yeah,
quite like,
up the
and
faraway tree. Yeah.
yeah, and I used to live on this near this mesa, and down below it was quite green, and you'd climb up onto the mesa, and it would be this very flat on top. It was an old volcanic plug actually, so it's very flat on top. And I used to feel like it
Ooh.
was the Land of the Faraway Tree, and no one ever knew what I was talking about because no one, I guess, in the States reads Enid Blyton, and I'd be like, "Isn't it like the Land of the Faraway?" Like every time you go up there, it feels like it's a different land, like to the one that's down below,
Yeah.
and they'd be like, "Okay, crazy."
What?
Yeah, but yeah, I read the famous Five, Secret Seven was definitely. I really wanted to be George from the famous Five. That's the famous Five. I think she was
Ooh.
quite feisty.
Yes.
She used to row the boat. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Mm,
Yes.
quite like that.
Yeah, it's funny. If you try to mention Enid Blyton when you didn't grow up in Britain or the colonies, everyone is like, I don't know what you're talking about. How could you not know what we're talking about? Enid Blyton is a staple.
It really was. And I used to have a lot of them
Yeah.
too. I don't know what happened to them. Maybe they're in my mum's loft somewhere. But yeah, it was one of those that, yeah, you bought them at boot sales like everyone. They just did the rounds, didn't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
do.
I actually liked the Famous Five so much that I wrote a play of because I had a dream I was
Ooh.
George from the Famous Five, and then I woke up. I remember this quite distinctly, and I cried because I wasn't George from the Famous Five,
Oh
and
no,
and
tragedy.
my mum being like, "Well, just write a play," and so we had this film for a while. So then I got some friends and my neighbour's dog, who was really unruly. This dog was not well trained, and so there's this video of me with like early '90s camcorder style, like having this adventure in our back garden where with this dog that's like constantly pulling on us, and none of the other people had bothered to learn the lines, so I'm like going, it's this next in the background. It was pretty tragic. I don't think it's my gateway into Hollywood, but yeah, Enid
That's
Blyton.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Those are some good memories.
It was. There were good sports for just going, all right, sure, like weirdo kid, like we'll help you.
Well, it's all right. You probably did some stuff for them as well.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, that's probably true. It'd be great to find
Cool.
that video. Oh, it'd be horrifying
You
and
should.
great
It'll be
simultaneously.
horrifying, but you should also find it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to it. Yeah, it was might be in a loft somewhere. You just don't know.
Try to excavate for it. And last question, because I know we're kind of at time. What advice would you give someone who wants to do what you do, or what advice should they ignore?
So one of the things that I think has been a theme through our discussion, and I keep coming back to, is this idea that don't 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 tell yourself a story about why you can't do something. Don't. It doesn't matter if you're gay or you're straight or you're from privileged background or not or whatever. If you want to do science and you're willing to work hard and you're willing to follow that passion and that dream, science, there's a space for you in science. And so NASA needs everyone from welders to computer scientists to electrical engineers, aerospace engineers. There's so many careers. So if you're interested in space, follow your passion, do what you love, but just kind of keep it in the back of your mind, because there's a spot for so many people. And I think just because you're not an old white dude doesn't mean there's not a spot for you, because the world is changing, and I think it's that NASA's already looking different, ESA's already looking different. These big organizations starting to be cognizant of diversity and making sure there's a spot at the table for everyone. And so I think just because you don't, just be careful of the narrative you tell yourself, because I'm still telling myself that I'm an imposter and I've been doing this 20 years. So if you haven't started it yet, you might feel like that, but it's just not true.
Because it's not you just, but if you want to do it, give it a go, give it a try, and you might like it, and you
Yeah,
might stay.
and who knows, the next rock star, the next rock star KBO flyby could be yours. Just it's out there for the taking.
Definitely. Very cool. That's good advice.
My nan was a bit old school, and she used to say to me, "Why haven't you just met a nice man? Why don't you just do that? Like, why sorry, for some reason the Backstreet Boys has come onto my ears. There we go. Oh gosh, that's 90s throwback if ever there was one. And so, like, I don't know, that idea of other people setting your expectations, what it is you're supposed to do in life, and what it is that your life should be about. Just make it your own. Don't follow other people's advice. If you want to do something that you think will make you happy, then do it. And yeah, I don't know. I think she came round to the idea that I think she could see that my choices had made me happy, and towards the end of her life could see that that was a good thing. But for a good decade, it was. I can't help but notice you haven't met a nice boy yet and got married and had lots of children. And you're like, well, yeah, I don't know, but I did make something that went to Mars. No, right? Definitely still on
Does that
the
count?
what? Yeah, yeah, I know. So just don't let other people's biases, run your life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and attitudes are changing across the generations now, and
That's definitely true.
people are starting to kind of understand that, and be more aware about all these other potential opportunities that there are for us, and that's cool.
Sometimes we tell ourselves this dialogue about the type of people that go on to apply to Oxford, to apply to, I don't know, the Harvards and the Princetons and the whatever, Ivy League kind of schools that you can think of. And now I went to comprehensives. I went to the local primary school and, comprehensive school, and then my local university. And as I went on, I learned that those institutions they're just people, and they're just people that like doing studying and learning about the world. And so, again, just don't let that dialogue ruin it for you. If you want to go to Oxford, then apply to go to Oxford, and maybe you'll get in, maybe you won't. But if you don't apply, you'll never know. And just that the world is there, and don't be put off because you happen to be female or transgender or whatever you think your disadvantage is. Just know that, having done admissions to Oxford recently, I was really heartened by the fact that those things didn't matter. It was about how rigorous was your science, how good were your grades, all the things that those metrics that you would hope to be taken into consideration were, and those background questions were less so. So just a word of encouragement, really. Just work hard and follow your dreams, and good luck. It's there's a lot of cool stuff in the world, and I
Yeah,
don't
there
want
is.
people to be put off by the wrong reasons.
Exactly, because you don't know until you try and
Yeah,
see what happens.
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent advice. So, thank you so much, Carly, for joining me today. It's been amazing talking to you, learning about all the cool stuff that you've been doing, all the amazing, I mean, my goodness, the number of projects, how much multitasking is involved there.
A little bit.
And
It's
yeah,
electronic
a little
calendars
bit.
help a lot. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been so cool learning about all the projects that you're working on, how you got there as well. I mean, yeah, you said it's, a bit of luck, a little bit of, putting yourself out there and giving it a shot, and that's amazing. And yeah, absolutely. Props for pushing through that imposter syndrome just to make sure you do the things that you want to do, and, the stuff that makes you happy, and that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's still a battle I face, but it's maybe it gets a little easier as you get older and you win a few of them, and kind of gives you a little bit of a maybe I can do this.
Yeah, exactly. Get a couple of wins under your belt.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Very cool. And if people would like to learn more about what you do, where can they go?
My Twitter handle is very unimaginative. It's Carly Howett. So
Yep.
that's definitely an easy way of staying in touch.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much again, and I hope you have an amazing day.
Thank you. You too. It was nice chatting.
It's been brilliant hearing about the Lucy mission, not to mention what we can learn about icy worlds. The common theme when space water comes up is the hope that we find proof of extraterrestrial life, but really all the research potential of these missions is pretty enticing. It's also inspiring to hear about how, despite having that persistent sense of being an imposter, Carly has taken punts anyway and pursued what she loves to do. It's a good reminder that when taking chances, don't just consider the risk of failure, but think about the opportunity for reward. To learn more about Carly and what we discuss on this show, or to connect with us, please visit the Steam-Powered website at steampoweredshow.com. You can also find out more about Carly on Twitter at Carly Howett, the link for which will in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, please let me know, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, and share this with your geeky or geek curious friends. You can also support Steam Powered on Patreon and Ko-fi under Steam Powered Show, the links for which will also be in the show notes. Thanks for watching!